right, everyone, welcome back to Creative Survival. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. Today we have a special guest. We have someone who is incredibly talented, writer, singer, actor, coach. She wears all kinds of different hats in the creative realm and is taking the time to talk to us from across the pond. So we want to welcome Melissa. Melissa, welcome to Creative Survival. It's good to have you.
Thank, thank you. I hope everybody's not disappointed when you said across the pond that all of a sudden I didn't go, oh, hello, thank you so much for having me.
Wait a minute. She sounds like an American.
Alas.
Just to kind of give our audience a little bit of a background on you, one, you sound American, but you live in England. Give us kind of a little
Mm.
background of kind of what you do and how you ended up in another country.
It's kind of a bit of a longish story, but the highlights are I'm from Los Angeles and always loved England, love historical things, historical dramas, Jane Austen, Shakespeare, and castles and thatched cottages. And yeah, it was just kind of a fairy tale place to be. And so whenever I got a chance, I was over here. And this is my third time living in England. Um, and so this time around, I came over with my husband from New Zealand. So he's here for work, and I'm here for work. And yeah.
Well, being someone who expresses and makes a living off the creative realm, growing up in Southern California, which is like the you know, hub for acting and that all of that. What
Mhm.
made you not want to pursue a career here versus traveling abroad?
Um, that's a good question because I did train in film production and theater when I was in LA, and for me, and maybe it's because when you're from a place, you don't really it's not that. It's like when people say, what are you doing here? Why are you in England? Or why are you in New Zealand? We all want to go to LA. So it's almost maybe like a grass is greener on the other side thing. I loved the product that was being put out from the UK and from, BBC Scotland. Um, and yeah, it just felt so special to me and I wanted to be a part of it. And it was different. And I've got this adventurous spirit. And I thought, well, LA will always be there. Um, and I don't know, I just felt a tug in my heart. I can't really, because logically, you're right, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why somebody who's already in LA, who's already kind of learning the ins and outs of the industry and making connections and doing a few things would leave. I think I had some personal things going on in my life that made wanting to put as much distance between me and that as possible had something to do with it. Um, Nothing illegal.
Would you mind discussing a little more on like maybe that personal
Oh.
process of what kind of made you want to separate from like LA as a whole?
Um, yeah, sure. I separated from my husband at the time and um, went through. It was a bit of a. I mean, obviously, it's a painful process when you end a marriage, and I think one thing that I found particularly hurtful was that we were so involved in church and nobody knew how to like deal with what we were going through or what I was going through. Um, I had one friend from church who still called me and still wanted to know how I was doing. And she's still my friend to this day, actually. But everyone else just kind of like vanished into the ether. And yeah, I think I reconnected with a couple of people through the magic of Facebook many years later. But I think I felt a bit wounded in that regard, and just ready for a fresh start and a new adventure.
I think there's a misconception on, and it's unfortunate that it's not, but like church as a whole is supposed to be like this safe place, right? Like
Hmm.
people are supposed to be nicer and more understanding and that whole song and dance. But we're all just imperfect people. For you, like the wounds that caused, how did you walk through those through your journey into then pursuing kind of acting in theater and like comedy groups in England?
Um, hmm. Well, I think a lot, a lot more. What went on with the church was in sort of the periphery to how I was feeling about what was going on and how I started to view myself. I think when you're raised in church and you're sort of taught that divorce is a sin, and no matter what, I think there was a lot of shame for me attached to that. So, and a lot of anger too, I think, just because I felt like I'd sort of done the right things, um, and it still went wrong. um, and so I was like, well, shoot, if, I went through that situation that I think a lot of people go through when they're like, well, hell, if, I did all the right things and it still went wrong. So what's the point of doing all the right things? So I, obviously stopped going to church but God was always present. He was always present, always kind of patient and wooing me. And I've felt God's hand on me since childhood. So I knew that I wasn't going to get too far away from his notice. So I think it was moving to England and just knowing I needed to be in a church and finding a church, and ended up finding a really great church community in London. And yeah, it just kind of went uphill from there.
How important was it for you, like dealing with all of that, and then also like having, your own creative identity and just kind of finding your voice in that? How important was it for you to find a community of people to kind of just help through that process?
Do I can't say that my church community helped me through the process of kind of navigating post marriage,
Mm-hmm.
because London is very transient and it's full of people who were like me in their 20s and 30s and stuff, who were kind of there for an adventure for a couple of years. None of them had been married before. They were all single, kind of there to make a bunch of money and then go back home to whatever country they were from. So it was, and a lot of them didn't even know that I had been married until like a while later. Um, so I was able to kind of like literally put it behind me, forget that it even happened, kind of, and just really start a fresh new life. And then I went to drama school at that time. So this is the first time that I moved to England. Went to drama school and just lived because I married quite young, and had always sort of wanted to know what it was like to do the kind of single student-y type of thing. So I was able to get that opportunity then. But I have to say, probably it was at that time that I was really hungry for more of God. I was really hungry for more supernatural experiences. I knew that I had somewhat of a prophetic gifting that had not been, what's the word, that had not been developed or cultivated really. So I just wanted to know more. And so would, I would watch like Patricia King. I don't know if you've heard of her. I would
Uh-huh.
watch tons and tons of Patricia King videos, and I read all the books that she wrote and recommended, and all of the books of her guests, and really, really just wanted to experience more of God. So being that single girl, kind of like single girl, foreign country, no, no real support, um, nobody looking after you, kind of. It was a great opportunity to really press into God and rely on Him for, paying my bills and all that stuff. So I think that probably best describes my transition from that season into probably now the season that I've been walking in.
I'm curious. So, like, if I was someone who didn't grow up in church and just has like an outside perspective, like, it's really easy, especially for people in church or out. Like, if you're going through hard times, it's easy to just kind of throw blame and then just kind of walk away, right? Like, screw this, life isn't good anymore. Like, I'm done, right? For you, what did it look like to just kind of know, kind of God's hand was on your life, and then when you mentioned just kind of being hungry for more than Him as you were going through this fresh start, like, what does that look like, or what does that feel like?
Mm. Indescribable. Yeah, forgot to mention, often I bust into songs, so it could be like Interview, the musical. What was it like? How do you describe knowing that God was always there? Like, in childhood, I prayed a lot. My mom is Catholic, so when I lived with her, I went through the Catholic experience, and which I think, how do I phrase this? A real desire to get things right, a real desire to follow the rules, that was with me. And I don't know if maybe it's also like an oldest child thing. But like if the penance was, 10 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, my goodness, I was gonna like do the best Our Fathers and Hail Marys ever, because I really needed to be forgiven for whatever it was I went to confession for as a 7-year-old, whatever. I don't know. I think when I went to visit my dad, he would read Bible stories to me as a little kid. I'm sure there was a lot of prayer for me from various relatives and stuff. God, like, I just had this God consciousness, that He was real, and words fail me a little bit. Second part of the question, what was that like to just be hungry for more? I think there's a feeling inside. There's like kind of this churning, this excitement. It was like somebody that you started dating, maybe, that you really, really wanted to see. So I would be that crazy girl on a Friday night when everybody else was out. I was like, yes, I could go home and close my door and pray in tongues for an hour and see what happens. And I loved having my Bible and my journal open, and just like on a Saturday morning, even just like sitting in bed till 1:00 in the afternoon with my Bible and my journal. And I had this hunger. I wanted to know more. I wanted to experience more. I wanted to feel more. And I did. I started to have supernatural experiences at that time, like angelic stuff. And, it's true. Like, when God says, seek and you will find, I was seriously seeking. And I think, I was also going through a healing journey. And so struggling with anxiety, struggling with some depression, which I think is so typical for artists, like that melancholy temperament. So I don't know if you're familiar with the 4 humors, the 4 temperaments. And it's based on like the bodily function. So you've got choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. And so sanguine, so my blend is the sanguine melancholy, which is not really supposed to blend typically, but it does in creatives. And sanguine is quite like life the party and happy, and they love being around people, and they love to entertain, and they love to have fun. But the melancholic is a very, analytical, artistic, deep thinker. Yeah, I was digging way into the melancholy side, I guess, of wanting to just be, me and God, and analyze scripture and kind of think deeply and feel deeply.
I'm curious, especially going to Catholic church, which tends to be pretty rigid. Like you said, like you need to do all things right. Like him, like it's pretty strict. Like it's not a lot of room for a relationship there. How how in the world did you go from like that rigidness to, and I don't mean to offend anyone who's Catholic, like I just from my personal experience, like how'd you go from like that into wanting to seek more of essentially a God that seems all about rules and like black and white?
Well, probably because when I was 10, I moved in with my dad. So, and my dad was going to a charismatic church. So, sort of adolescence through high school, I was really able to experience a different side of Christianity, much more, I guess, liberal and interested in the supernatural and gifts and stuff. So that's.
How does all this play? Like, you grew up in that you were exposed to like a more relational and like liberal form of Christianity, and then like while you're doing that, like you're also discovering your creative voices and talents, and just
All
kind of
the
like,
voices in my head.
yeah. What do we want to do when we grow up, which something I have to answer every day. But like how did that play into your creative voice and identity and journey?
I went through a real time of seeking, like, as everyone does, who am I? What's my purpose on this planet? Um, and read a lot of books, took all the personality tests ever. Like, if you were a dog, what dog would you be? I was like really seeking all this, not like so much introspection. Um, I would be a Burmese mountain dog, by the way, in case you wanted to know. So they say. Um, yeah, and so within that time and doing lots of journaling and reading about all the personality types and stuff, there was so much of that was affirming and like, oh my gosh, I'm not weird, like fill in the blank, weird, crazy, stupid, irresponsible, like I'm not these things. This is actually like my God-given personality type, and this is the way I'm wired. And yeah, every personality type and wiring has growth opportunities. Fair enough. Yep. So when I started to see that, so on the one hand, when I was going through all the personality things, and it was saying, you would tend to be a performer, an artist, and, actor, whatever, journalist, all like, entrepreneur. So, or in the helping professions, like a counselor or, whatever. It's just like, oh, okay. So all these things that I'm interested in make sense, and there's a purpose for all of it. The one thing that the story that I shared with you was when I was doing all of this seeking, I just had this image in my head of being on the conveyor belts, and God is handing out all the gifts, and it's like a faucet, and they're all like running down into your head, like the top of your head's open, and it's running in like water, and everybody gets a measure, and they move on, and it was like he turned the faucet on and then got distracted by something else, and then was like, oh shoot, better turn that off and send her on her way, and she's going to be really confused, but good luck. So I felt that because I felt like I had so many competing expressions that like really wanted to come out. Like I wanted to write, but I also wanted to be on stage, but I wanted to be on TV, but I wanted to sing. I did want to dance when I was little. Yeah, but I also was really interested in personal development. And my favorite question was like to anybody, no matter how old they were, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And talk about that. And I always found it so fascinating. So it was like, how can I make this work? It doesn't feel like it can work. And then I read a book by Barbara Scheer called Refuse to Choose. And she's amazing. She's like a grandma. She's like the grandma that you always wish that you had, because you would probably have done a lot more with your life by now. But in lieu of having her be your grandma, she's written lots of books. And that and a couple of other books like The Renaissance Soul just felt like it gave me so much permission to be exactly who I am and to do all the things I wanted to do and explore all the things that interested me. And I really feel like that was a, divine kind of like a head look. Look at this book. Look at this book. Look at these books. Look at these resources. And really bringing my attention to people who are successful and doing a bunch of different things, like, Ben Franklin or Leonardo da Vinci, or even just the people in the entertainment industry who, they write and they direct, but they also put themselves in, like with a cameo or a bigger part. And, it's like, well, yeah, if they can do all that, why can't I? And I'm going to. So I think that was a long-winded answer, but
That was a great answer. So then because you obviously even though you chose several facets of creativity to kind of express yourself and to pursue, what were the ones that you had to kind of analyze and leave behind? What was that process like?
if anything, I feel like everything's ramping up right now. I feel like and being a coach and the journey of entrepreneurship, but then also the kind of coaching that I do, which is super duper mindset based, and being interested in psychology and, all the inner healing stuff. So after drama school, I went and got a master's degree in seminary, did counseling and pastoral care. So I think that journey, like, you got to take your own medicine, right? So I think I had a lot of mindset stuff that was stopping me from fully owning. I mean, I would say, yeah, I'm an actor, and I did a lot of theater, but I never had a show reel until about 5-6 months ago. And like, if you're a serious actor, that's just kind of like square one of things. But I never felt confident or secure to have that. And so it was almost like when we moved here, I was like, right, stake in the ground time. One of my dreams was actually to come to England and act. And here I am, and this is my time. And it's like, poop or get off the potty. So I feel like just things have sort of really gotten into alignment. And I stated my intention of, okay, like, I'm going to pursue these things with like this energy and this drive and this intention that I hadn't before, because it feels like this is my time. So I can't say that I'm like, things are like I've kind of shifted away from some things, like maybe cross stitch, crochet.
So then what about when things weren't in an upswing and you were kind of taking your own medicine, so to speak? Like, what were some of those roadblocks that you had to work through to kind of get to the place where you're at now?
We tell ourselves a lot of stories. Fill in the blank. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too American. I'm too heavy. I'm too this, or I'm not enough this. I can't do this kind of accent, therefore I will not work. Or being satisfied with a particular level of success, I suppose, like, and being really comfortable. Getting into your comfort zone and staying there, I think, is a huge block. So things that seemed really easy to me would be like being on a worship team, doing vocals, that was easy. But like putting my name down for an open mic to sing, not so easy. So I didn't do it. I just stayed where I felt comfortable, where things felt familiar, where I felt safe. And that's the thing. Our brains are always trying to keep us safe. So anything that looks like it's out of our comfort zone, a threat in any way, scary, our brains are like, oh my gosh, let me help you. Let me preserve your life. Because if you go forward and do that, you might die. And I'm here to keep you alive. So, so lots of things keeping me in my comfort zone. Like I did a lot of fringe theater in New Zealand. And yeah, and it got to the point where I didn't I was so familiar with the company. It just felt like I don't want to say like I didn't even have to audition. They just kind of like begged me. That wasn't the case. But it felt like if I wanted to be in a show, there was a part for me. So, but what was not so comfortable, was putting a show reel together. I had done stuff there. I worked and did stuff with an amazing group of filmmakers there. But I never did, because maybe like somewhere in the back of my head, I was like, oh shoot, well, if I put a reel together, then bigger auditions are going to come, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen in those bigger auditions, and I might screw it up. So let's just stay back here where we're comfortable and we know what we're doing.
No, it totally does. How did you move forward in fighting that kind of like lizard part of your brain that tries to keep us alive?
You retrain your brain. I did a lot of study, and the more I started working with clients, the more I could see it's not that you don't know how to pick up the phone and call somebody. You know how to pick up the phone and physically dial the numbers, but the fact that you're not doing it means there's something going on in here. So the more I started to see that, and the more I started to recognize that in myself, this girl loves to learn. So I went back and I did like mindset coach certification, a lot of stuff with money. That was one of the big things that I coach people on, is their view of money. And money's the catalyst. People think it's about money. People think, I just want to make more money. But in actual fact, they have much deeper questions that they want answers to. Not not how can I make more money? That's not the question they really want answered. They want, how can I be safe and have a lot of money? How can I be a good money manager? How can I feel good about myself and charge for my services? There's like, how can I get rid of, my father's voice in my head saying I'm never going to be a success, like all those things, like so wrapped up. So I used money as the doorway to kind of like get in there and go like, okay, what's the deeper healing? So, but for myself, I had a lot of money issues. And I think, I don't know who said it, but they say you teach what you need to learn. So I think for me, I studied applied neuroscience and coaching. I studied positive psychology. What started me on my mindset journey, I have to say, was Joyce Meyer. Mama Joyce, The Battlefield of the Mind, classic book. But not only that, she's got this little book called The Secret Power of Speaking God's Word. And that introduced me to like retraining my brain with the thoughts that I thought, which were totally scripture, and speaking it out. Because the thoughts you think and the words you say have so much power to not only reflect the reality that you're living in, but also to shape the reality that you're living in. So all of that stuff. But I developed what I call the Money Mindset and Miracles journal, with journal prompts every day. And I was doing that every day, taking my own medicine. There's a really great app called Think Up that I love, where you record affirmations or scripture verses or whatever you want to listen to on repeat, and it puts it to music, but it's in your own voice because we think our thoughts in our own voice. So it's that kind of like double whammy. You're going to hear thoughts in your own voice over and over. And it really does work. You see it over time. The things that I have done this year towards my career and my business and my creative endeavors, I wouldn't have done a couple of years ago. And I really, really, really credit it to the mindset work.
That's great.
I've drunk the Kool-Aid big time.
So before I ask specific questions on mindset, how does even just shifting your mindset and then just doing positive affirmations and thinking positive, like how is that different from like vision boards and like The Secret?
Funny you should mention vision boards because I just led a vision board workshop this weekend. Do you know, Patricia King has a really great book out called God's Law of Attraction. I think that there are lots of universal laws. My opinion, I know that we're delving into some controversial subject matter. But, you know, the universal law of gravity, what goes up must come down, the law of sowing and reaping, you know, reciprocity, things like, I think it's called the law of intention, you know, where you set your focus on, that's, you know, what either enlarges or you empower that or you give energy to. Scientifically, I guess it activates the reticular activating system in your brain. So like what you focus on, all of a sudden, you know, the whole, like, you know, so if you focus on a white Honda, like I'm going to buy a white Honda, all of a sudden you're seeing them out in the road. And it's not like they magically just appeared. Your brain is now got the signal, I need to be paying attention to these because you've been thinking about this a lot. Which kind of is a nice, I know you wanted to talk about law of attraction and we'll get there. But it's kind of a nice seg into the power of retraining your brain and seeing that like quickly in action. If you intend to see positive things, you will. If you intend to see negative things, you will. So according to Patricia King anyway, she believes, and I think I'm pretty on board with it, that there is such a thing about the law of attraction, but I think it's not like how The Secret puts it out. And I wish I'd read the book more recently so I could give you a better answer. So from my perspective, for me anyway, in my life, I think it's nothing more than putting your faith out for something. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one when I think I'm going through this whole like, don't want to say anything that's going to ruffle too many feathers.
Oh, go for it.
For people who kind of aren't there yet, because it's a journey, especially people are very like, Christians are they get super scared of anything that's kind of like, oops, sorry about that, low battery. They get scared. We get scared when things seem like heresy, you know, go figure, or new age stuff. And my opinion of like new agey stuff is that God, I feel like there's so much power that we have not tapped into that is ours, that is meant for us, that people who are spiritual seekers, you know, and kind of have fallen into the new age way of thinking, have tapped into and using, like they've plugged their plug into the wrong plug though. The power is still legit, but it's like, it's not right.
It's just the wrong frequency.
Totally. So I believe that there is power in the spoken word, but I think that there is so much that we shy away from because we don't understand it and we're scared. And I think we need to be less scared of the devil and less scared of getting into deception, and more excited about everything that God has for us. And trusting that if we're moving into error, that God is strong enough, big enough, powerful enough to redirect us. I think we miss out on so much because we're afraid of, what's the devil going to do to me?
No, it's so
That's how
even
I feel.
it's so true. Or even just fear of like you were saying before, like putting yourself out, right? Like, oh, if I do this and then I fail, like in our minds, it's like the world will end, even though we'll still be living, we'll still continue on with our lives. But it is
Yeah.
that thing in us that we do try to protect ourselves from hurt, both emotionally, physically, and that's huge to be able to kind of step out on a limb.
You don't want to be separated from the herd either. So that
Yes.
fear of rejection is like super strong survival instinct.
Yeah, like have you ever seen the YouTube videos where they do studies on people's like psychological like standings, and like they'll have people literally like someone will just go stand in a line somewhere with a rope and no one knows what it's for, and all of a sudden like there's this huge line going like all the way down the street and people will stand in
Yep.
line for hours for nothing, like just because other
They have
people
no
are doing
idea.
it. Like other people are doing it, fear of missing out, like it's it's
Yeah, I
funny.
saw the one with was it the doctor's office where all the people were sitting and then one person stood up, just stood up. And so somebody else stood up. And before you know it, everyone was standing up and nobody said a word. Oh, it was when a bell rang. It was like a
That's
buzzer
right.
went off, somebody stood. So every time the buzzer went off, somebody else would stand. It's fascinating.
It really is. I'm curious, just to go back a couple steps before we wrap
Mm.
up,
Hmm.
because you were talking about money, which I think is a huge issue for most everyone. Um, how do
Yeah.
you? Because money essentially is a tool. Like if you think of
Hmm.
it as like shovels, like if you actually say, "Oh, I want to just own tons of shovels," why? Like you have to.
Yeah.
They have a purpose. Like what is the purpose of them? So for anyone, because anyone who artists, like anyone who doesn't have money, or you go through, like in film industry of seasons, like, oh crap, I don't have work for 3 months. This is dry.
Hmm.
This is awful. Like, luckily
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
like had enough saved up. Hopefully, how do you? Because then money just becomes the center of everything. How do you break that cycle? Like, how do you change your view of money, or ask yourself the right
Oh,
questions to get out of that cycle?
that is a whole another call, my friend.
All right, part two.
um, well, how do you break the cycle? Well, you have to know that there is a cycle. Awareness is always the first step. Ding. So you have to know. You have to know what you're like, and a lot of people bandy this about this phrase "money story." You have to know what your money story is. What were the like what how did money make you feel as a child? And sometimes, so like what did your parents say, or grandparents, or caregivers, whatever, what did they say about money? What was the general mood about money in the
Mm-hmm.
house? It might not even be anything they said, but it was just like, how did you feel? And through those circumstances, then you as a child, because it usually starts in everything starts in childhood, typically, it informs a belief. Like, so you make a vow, a subconscious vow, like I will never, or I will always, usually starts the vow. I will never be poor. I will always have enough money in case a man leaves me. I mean, like stuff. And then it forms a belief, which forms your actions and decision making. So that's kind of the cycle in a real quick nutshell. But yeah, so the first thing is really like how was money handled? What did I see or experience? And then what did I conclude from that? So what is my conclusion? What vow and what vows did I make? And then you have to examine those conclusions and go like, okay, how does that inform the things I have done over my life now? Somebody who's who had a parent leave, or parents always fighting over money, they might equate money issues with a breakdown in a relationship. So they might push money away or feel very uncomfortable or very unsafe having any, because they feel like if they do, the person that they're with will want too much from them. It will cause a lot of friction, maybe leave them, or vice versa. I mean, so that's like one example of how it kind of plays out. And I believe that you can do a lot of that kind of discovery on your own with journaling and stuff. I think it's more helpful and more expedient to have somebody else who can kind of hear what's not being said and like listen for the patterns and point things out. That's probably the quicker route, I would say. But
that's really good. That's a good starting point for sure. We'll have to come back and do part 2 of the money mindset.
Yeah, be great.
That'd be a big one. So I know we're wrapping up on time. As we close out, is there any kind of tools, thoughts, wisdom you'd kind of like to throw out just over the things that we've been able to talk about, just to kind of, maybe someone was in your position, years ago, and they're in that position now, just something that you would have liked someone to have said to you or given to you to just kind of help you through that journey, maybe a little quicker, or maybe it'll take a little bit of the edge off of the pain?
There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And if you are one of those sort of creative people who have a lot of ideas and a lot of interests and talents, and you can do a lot of different things, that's not a bad thing. And there is a purpose for every single bit of it, or else God would not have done it, because he's good. Like, he's really, really good and really actually cares about every little thing about you. And so was very intentional the way he made you and the way he designed you. And I think I would encourage people. I wish I would have learned about mindset stuff earlier in life, because I think I sabotaged a lot of relationships and a lot of opportunities just because I didn't know any better. And that's the thing. When you know better, you can do better. So sometimes you actually can't, you cannot do better because you don't know. So I think if I could tell your listeners to really look into that, what thoughts have I been thinking? What things have I been saying? And just get really aware of those things and seek out how they might have been less than helpful and have been holding you back, and reframe them.
Well, anyone watching this who feels connected and this has helped, how can they kind of follow you, see what you're doing, maybe even just reach out on socials? Where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Facebook. But I have my website is upstory.com, story with an E. It's very English. Upstory with an E, and .com. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find me at Melissa Williams if you do a search.
Okay. And then, and if you update your handles, I'll put the newer links in the description.
How can they find me? Carrier pigeon? I think Upstory is probably the best, or Facebook is really the best, actually. Okay. I'm sorry, I should have been more prepared. Oh my gosh, creative frazzled brain.
Well, this has been great, Melissa. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. Anyone who got anything out of this video, just subscribe, and comment below, because I would love to continue the conversation. This is all about building a community, so we would love to hear from you.